Hey everyone, today we're talking with Bree and Jordan from Somerled Designs. This episode is packed full with strategic insights on how to drive a high performance short-term rental property. A few nuggets you'll get out of this is one, the importance of amenities, two, the importance of photos and where lots of hosts will fall short on both of those things. Three, another thing I thought was interesting was just the way they think about the customer journey. There's a lot of nuggets that you can learn from in this episode. So I hope you enjoy it and we'll get started. So welcome, Bree. Welcome, Jordan. Very happy to have you guys on the podcast.
Thanks for having us on.
Bree comes from an investing and marketing background. She owns 30 short-term rentals with her husband, which means she doesn't just design these spaces, she lives with the outcomes of those decisions. She really brings the investor's eye, what the return is for specific designs, what scales, and what moves the needle on nightly rates. Jordan brings the design expertise, her deep understanding of how space, detail, and experience influences guest behavior, is a creative engine behind every Somerled project. She has a background in design and even art curation, so really bringing the left brain side to the duo, although both of you have quite good taste, I'll say, as someone who has spent a lot of time with both of you. And together they created the solution that they could not find in the market, a design firm that leads with research and then builds around results. So tell me a little bit about the backstory. How did your paths cross, and then how did Somerled get started?
We consider ourselves lucky in some ways that our paths cross. So ultimately, this all started when I got into investing in short-term rentals around 2020. I had been investing in long-term rentals and then saw some posts online about the short-term rental world, and it got me very excited. Like you mentioned, Marc, I came from a marketing background. So marketing for long-term rentals, that's not a thing. You don't really need to market for them. You list them and then you rent them. And so the short-term rental strategy, I looked at this and I thought, I want to get into real estate and I can combine my marketing efforts and create an experience, a brand around a property. And that got me so excited. So my husband and I went on this journey of just learning everything we could about short-term rentals. We made our first investment local to where we live in Utah. Currently, we don't have any more rentals in Utah. It's not the greatest state. But after that, we found some awesome markets to invest in, and we saw great success. And the reason for that success really came from the strategy. My approach, and now in 2020, it was a different landscape than it was now. Things weren't as competitive, but I still approached my properties with a strategy. I came in understanding, okay, who am I targeting? Who is the true guest? What do I need to do to stand out from my competitors? And I laid that out. But I was really stumped with the design. I appreciate you saying that. I am creative. I do have decent taste, but it's overwhelming. So Jordan and I were good friends, and she worked as an interior designer. And so I texted her and asked her if she could help me make some design decisions. I was like asking as a friend. And then she really stepped in and helped me in a big way. When she didn't have to, she stepped in for free and gave me a lot of free advice. And we had a lot of fun with that first property. It was in Phoenix, Arizona. And from there, that property launched and it performed so well. I kept investing. And then I was like, okay, Jordan, let me just hire you. Let's do this thing again. And at that point, we found just this magic in the strategy and design. I was a part of a community of short-term rental investors. And so some of them had reached out just more as, hey, can you help me out? And I'm like, Jordan, do you want to help these people out? And we started doing some design for them. And then it was fall of 2022. We said, let's do this. Let's create a business around strategy-led short-term rental design.
I'd love 30 properties is quite a portfolio. I'd love to hear sort of how that perspective informs how you work with clients, specifically how you're leveraging that experience and what you learned. It sounds like you started with that first one and quickly expanded, but sort of would love to hear a little bit of what were the learnings as you went from 1 to 2 to 10 to 20. And now, obviously, both of you have done over 1,000 of these.
Oh my gosh, so many learnings. So that was the start of Somerled, and along that journey of Somerled, I was still investing in short-term rentals. My husband was the main driver behind the investing side, but then our team at Somerled would design and set it up. So we actually just turned 30 last year, and my husband set this goal to have 30 properties by the time we turned 30. So that's the 30 number. We currently are launching our 36th property. So we've even come a long way from there. The learnings, one was market's important. That's kind of the first step, is finding the right market that's going to yield a high return, because you could have phenomenal design and all these things, but if you're in a too saturated market or a market that doesn't have demand, it's just hard. That's like the groundwork. So we learned that pretty quickly. We honed in on the markets that we liked and that worked well for us. And our kind of rule of thumb now, what we go for is vacation rental markets, but more local markets, not the big nationwide markets. Like, we do have properties in Fort Lauderdale and Phoenix, but we now have narrowed it down into more Midwestern markets, where you have your major cities, and then where are they driving to vacation? And it's not somewhere that people around the country or even worldwide are flying into. Those markets tend to be a bit more saturated. You can perform well, but it's just harder because there's so much competition. So we narrowed in on the markets that we like, and the size of homes. We are buying 6+ bedroom homes. We just find that there's always going to be a need for that. These multi-generational families that want to stay all together in one house. So that was a big learning curve, was finding the markets that we like to manage in and that were performing well. And then another learning curve was, honestly, I mean, this may sound weird coming from an owner of Somerled who designs, but I still had to get over this idea that everything that goes into the house is just this expense, and I've got to lower expenses, because there are key items that are an investment, and those are your amenity items, and that's your wow moment design. You've got to, I had to retrain myself to say it's okay to spend because I'm going to get an ROI. So I had to learn where to spend because there's going to be a return, and where to save. We've designed over 1,000 properties, and so we have constantly been just learning and changing, because our ultimate goal is to drive more revenue for our clients.
It's scary to spend money on the design when you've already spent all this money on a down payment and all the other costs that are associated with getting started, and the property is not cash flowing yet. And we really try to encourage the independent hosts who sign up with us, don't get to the 10-yard line and then in the last portion of the property skimp out on the furnishing. It's so important. I think what concern people might have is 1,000 rentals. I mean, do these feel like cookie cutter and you're just taking the same stuff? But when you look at the rentals themselves, they're so tailored to the local market and so thoughtfully done. So Jordan, I'd love to ask you to walk listeners through an example of, maybe you could pick 2 markets that you guys have worked in that are totally different. What changes? How do you keep that personality for each of your clients as you guys scale?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because once you start seeing the numbers, it's like, how can you differentiate? Or even in the same market of, wow, Somerled's done a lot in this market, how do I know that I'm going to be different from my next door neighbor? And it's so important, because we always start with that strategy that we've kind of touched on, is when an investor comes to us, they already have their property in that market. And so that is such a great starting point, because we say, okay, we know that this is a vacation market that people are wanting to travel to. And so we really put ourselves in the guest shoes and understand what are their goals for the vacation. And so we really tailor our designs and the experience that we're going to be creating with that end guest in mind, and keeping in mind that they're choosing the location of your Airbnb before they're actually choosing your property. So we lean into that local influence a lot. And so, okay, what are people doing when they are actually traveling here? Are there certain attractions in the area that is kind of drawing these people in? Is there a certain aesthetic of this area that may be different than somewhere else that we really want to lean into? And so that local influence, and then those guests that we are designing for, really give us a lot of information, so we can then build a design specifically for them. So let's say we're in Bradenton, Florida. That is a place that we have designed a lot, and it's a really great vacation market for families. And so because it's a family location, we know that their activities are going to be mostly surrounded by, sometimes multi-generational families. They're going to be going to the beach, they're going to be going to the pool, they're going to be, barbecuing in their backyard. And so what are things that we want to be able to design for this property specifically that is going to cater to these people's needs? And then also keeping in mind, okay, this is in Florida, we want it to stand out because there's a lot of other Airbnbs that they could choose over yours. So what are we going to do to stand out? And then what are we going to do in terms of like the color palette and the design aesthetic to feel very localized to Bradenton, Florida? And then versus, let's say, Nashville, Tennessee, we've been in there multiple times. It's like a very big market that, is a little bit different than like what Bree was saying of like where they're investing. This one is kind of like that nationwide, everyone knows Nashville. There's a few different groups that are traveling to Nashville, one of them being, girl groups. And so how are we going to cater to these women in Nashville? Because they're willing to spend maybe a little bit more. It's for a bachelorette party. It's for a birthday party. It is something that is gathering women probably from lots of different regions. And so how are we going to cater to their needs? And that aesthetic and those amenities that we're going to be putting into that property versus one that's catered in Florida to families, it's going to be a very different design direction. So that's why it's so important to do that strategy from the very beginning. So we understand who we're designing for, we understand what the local draw is, and then we really cater everything around that. I will say that Somerled, we start from scratch every single time. There isn't like a design blueprint that we just continue to use over and over. It is from scratch every time because we want to be able to track those people in any given market, and there is room to be able to make things unique in a way that still cater to other individuals. So that gives a little taste of what our mindset is going into all of those different projects that we take on.
I imagine there might be some things that it's pretty easy to get owners to go along with, certain investments, and then maybe some investments where you guys are really battling or really pushing owners to be thoughtful about certain spend or certain amenities, and there's resistance. Are there any examples you guys are really passionate and you really advocate that owners spend money in certain places that sometimes are unconventional or not necessarily intuitive?
I think so. Our goal is always to get the highest return. So we have tweaked this process because we are managing relationships with these owners and we want what's best for them. And sometimes it is some education and like bringing them along the path of understanding like what is going to get them the best return. So a couple examples, we will always advocate for amenities. So we're going to present before we start designing, strategy is laid out. And in the strategy, we highlight what are the ROI pieces. We're not really going to talk about the filler pieces in a hallway to have a nice art piece like that. When you're there at the property, that creates a good guest experience, but that's not the reason people are booking, and bookings are what drive revenue. So in our strategy, we have sections on amenities, and we're going to list out, here are the non-negotiable amenities. Make it very clear in your market, and we'll pull in the comps. You have to have a hot tub. Look, 10 out of 10 of the top properties have a hot tub. Or, we'll pull in the percentages because these are investors. They're not coming. Some of them have a great design eye, and that's a little bit, we have some creative conversations, but a lot of them are just looking for the numbers and the data to prove to them. And they're actually very flexible when we provide that data. So we'll say, here's the non-negotiable amenities. Now we need to take it a step further. We have to bring in unique amenities because that's how you're going to stand out and your occupancy will increase. You'll be able to charge a premium rate because you're not just competing on price with these people. We have to have this unique amenity list, and that's where we're going to bring in amenities that feel a little bit riskier, you can say, because they're not proven in this market, but we'll still provide the evidence and the proof to them. And the way that we'll do that is we'll tie it back to either the target audience and say, this is a girls group, they're going to love the karaoke. You're not going to see a lot of competitors with it, but they're going to love it because of X, Y, and Z. Or we'll look to more competitive but comparable markets. So I'm investing in markets that are maybe the middle ground of competitiveness. They're not up there with the Seviervilles or the Nashvilles, but we'll look to those markets and we'll say, this is a comparable market. It's the same reason for travel. These guys are 5 years ahead of the game, and let's bring in ideas from that market. And it's justified over there, so why wouldn't it be justified here? It's going to, set you ahead of this curve. So we're very keen on amenities. We'll push that before we push anything else because we know that's the revenue drivers.
Sounds like you start with that before you're even speccing or picking specifics. You're starting with the strategy, and the amenities are a core part of that strategy.
Then the second thing is the top 5 photos. So that's part of our strategy too. So many options on Airbnb. People are scrolling fast, and when they're scrolling, they have the option to, view a few before they click in. That's the first click we want to earn. We want to get them curious and clicking in. Then we want them to see everything and say, this is matching and checking all my boxes and maybe exceeding my expectations. So I'm going to go ahead and book. But to get that first click, we need to have just wow photos. So we're going to outline what will be those most likely top 5 photos and how are we going to design around them. So if you're in an outdoor market like a Scottsdale where people are coming to be outside in the warmth, your backyard will most likely be that first photo. Okay, what are we going to do in that backyard from an amenity perspective, from a design perspective, even from a lighting perspective? And that's where then we get into budget conversation. We're allocating the most budget towards the amenities and those top 5 photos.
So interesting. And I do think that's probably counterintuitive to someone who's getting started. They would probably like look at the house. Okay, how many beds? Okay, room by room, what should I buy? But your approach is really like correct. It's like, well, what's the strategy? How do we accomplish that strategy? To accomplish that with these big, eye-catching amenities. And so starting with that and then working backwards, I think is a really helpful insight. Are there any like really insightful, helpful, quick tips that you guys would offer to someone who's just getting started with their first property to learn sort of from your wisdom?
When you're budgeting everything, like don't just think as design as an expense, but truly as an investment, and also think through the full installation process. So you're gonna need labor. You are also going to need to hire additional professionals like a photographer. So don't, invest all this great money and time and effort into design or these products and then cut yourself short by not getting professional labor and, a professional photographer in, because again, that we are in this day and age, like you want to be able to really spend like a good amount of budget on a very professional, good photographer. So then you are going to be putting your best foot forward to get those bookings.
I would say the number one thing you're new to short-term rentals. Think of yourself as a business owner. That's exactly what you are. And any good business owner would come in with a financial strategy and a marketing plan. And so your financial strategy is understanding your investment, having a strong investment analysis that's conservative so that you can see, like you'll exceed that analysis. And your marketing plan is your design and your photos.
I'd love to end with some rapid fire. I'll kind of ping pong across both of you at these, but I'll start with you, Jordan. What's one product that you think is wildly overrated in short-term rentals?
I would say anything white upholstery, like sofas and chairs. Just don't do it. But what you want to stick with white is always your linens. So do white on the beds, like with your linens and pillows. Do not do white upholstery, because it's just not going to uphold. Like even performance fabrics, just don't do white.
And then Bree, what's one, now you've talked about this a lot already, so maybe the answer is obvious, but what's one product category you think people really underinvest in?
Amenities.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would say, like you said, the photos sell. The photos are your revenue driver. And so amenities that will show up well in photos. And let me take this a step further. This isn't a product, but it's a strategy to highlight this product. Add in lifestyle, because you will see so many hot tubs as you're scrolling. But if then you see a hot tub with a couple in the hot tub and they have wine glasses and there's a sunset behind them and the steam is coming up, that is a shock factor. That draws your attention. So I would say large amenities that show up well in photos and add lifestyle to them.
All right, Jordan, back to you. What's one product that always sparks joy?
We love our neon signs. We always try to incorporate, it doesn't even matter like what market it is, but we really like to do some sort of neon sign. It evokes joy because we are able to create some sort of personality for the space. It's something that you don't have in your residential home. It feels very experiential. It creates photo moments, and people want to then snap a photo, share with their friends, their family, write a review.
I feel like I can sometimes, like whenever I see a listing and I see a nice, well photographed picture of a neon sign in like a hero space, I'm always like, I wonder if Somerled designed this. Well, thanks, Bree. Thanks, Jordan. One shout out I wanted to for our listeners is that Somerled has just launched a new design course for owners. So if you're interested in upskilling there and learning a bit more about what drives best practice short-term rental design, we will have the link in the show notes. Would encourage you to go and check that out.
Awesome.
Thanks, Marc.
So much.